Confinement, Chapter 1. Jury, how do you find the defendant in the case of Alex Ingram, charged with forging prescription drugs? The lead juror's voice was steady but somber. We find the defendant guilty, Your Honor. The judge's gaze fell, his expression reflecting the weight of the verdict. I'm truly sorry, Alex. I understand you had good intentions, but unfortunately, this was a case of wrong place, wrong time. Alex's tears began to fall as she spoke, her voice trembling. Your Honor, I never meant to hurt anyone. If I could undo everything, I would in an instant. Please, Judge Farrow, have mercy. I only did this because my boyfriend was suffering. He was in unbearable pain and couldn't afford the medication. Those pills would have cost him thousands. Judge Farrow's tone softened, tinged with sympathy. Alex, I've known you since you were a child, always the beacon of light in this small town. It pains us all to see you in this position. Normally the sentence for these charges ranges from 2 to 11 years, but given your clean record and the circumstances, I'm willing to show mercy. Alex looked up, a flicker of hope igniting her eyes. The company you work for has assured me that you are a corporate-level work-from-home employee, and they want to keep you employed as long as I can avoid sending you to prison. Therefore, I'm considering a 6-month house arrest at your childhood home. Don't you think that's a fair compromise? Judge Farrow proposed. Alex's face drained of color. Most would be relieved by this verdict, but Alex knew too well the dark reality awaiting her at home. Your Honor, please, anything but that. I don't feel safe there. I can't go back, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Nonsense, Alex. You'll have the house mostly to yourself. Your brother is the only other resident, and he shouldn't be much of a bother, the judge replied reassuringly. Panic gripped Alex. No, Judge Farrow, you don't understand. There has to be another way. The judge's expression grew more serious. Miss Ingram, the only alternative is prison. Alex weighed her options. Time in a prison cell, losing her job, and enduring setbacks in her life progress, or 6 months confined to the house she feared, but a chance to keep her job. I'll take prison, Alex said decisively. Laughter erupted in the courtroom. Judge Farrow, shaking his head with a wry smile, declared, Miss Ingram, you always had a good sense of humor. Very well. I send you to 6 months of house arrest. He slammed his gavel down with finality. As the courtroom emptied, Alex sat frozen, engulfed in deepening panic. Her mind replayed tragic events that led to that moment, a grim narrative she felt would haunt her forever. Last winter, she laid beside her ailing boyfriend, Luke, whose condition had worsened significantly. Without insurance and having lost his job due to deteriorating health, Luke had grown increasingly afraid of seeking medical help. His suffering became unbearable, and Alex, desperate to alleviate his pain, made the fateful decision to forge a prescription for him. When she went to pick up the medication, local police alerted by the drugstore were there waiting for her. She had mispronounced the drug's name, triggering their suspicion. That night, Alex spent her first night in jail, and Luke passed away in his sleep, alone, in agony. Shaking off the memory, Alex resolved to confront Judge Farrow, determined to fight her fate. Sir, I cannot live with my brother, Alex exclaimed, after weaving through the crowd of people to find Judge Farrow. We don't have a good relationship, and honestly, I'm worried for my safety if I lived with him. Sweetie, we both know your brother, and I seriously doubt that there's any danger. I would even guarantee it, Judge Farrow responds. It may even benefit you. Your brother's the only family you have left, and this will be a wonderful opportunity for you two to rekindle any relationship you had. At this point, Alex is finding out there's no point in putting up a fight anymore. She is trying to cope with the fact that she is in danger and no one is going to help her get out of this. At the moment, a tall man in a police uniform walks up to the two of them. Alex, I would like you to meet Officer Chester, says the judge about the man who just walked up. He is going to be taking you to your home and setting you up for your sentence. Nice to meet you, ma'am, says Officer Chester. He will also be checking in on you periodically throughout your time in the house, Judge Farrow announces. If you will, take Miss Ingram away, officer. Officer Chester and Alex exit the courtroom and head to the police car parked out back. She gets in the back while Officer Chester starts the car and the two drive toward the Ingram household. "You seem down for someone who just got off with house arrest for what should have been a prison sentence," he tells Alex. "I'd much rather be in jail right now. I'm not safe there," she tells the cop. "Is it ran down? Is there mold, something that might be harmful?" he asks. "No, sir. Just my brother. He's always been jealous of me and he's mad at the world. I'm afraid the two of us living together might end up with me being dead," she responds. Officer Chester, now with a concerned look in his face, questioned if the judge made the best call. "Sorry if I sound dumb. I'm new to the area. Is it that bad? What did you do to your brother?" he asked. "He has some issues that cause him to be mad at the world, and he hates me most because I was born normal," she tells the cop. "Please, you need to tell Judge Sparrow it is not a safe environment for me. There has to be another option for me to serve my sentence." "Ma'am, I don't know what's going on, but it is my duty to make sure that you are safe," Officer Chester says while pulling up to the house. "I'm going in first while you stay out here. I will assess the situation, and I'll determine if it's safe for you or not." Officer Chester walks inside as Alex waits for him to return. She hopes that he sees the danger and gets her out of the situation, but she highly doubts it, though. She starts having devious thoughts about escaping. She knows that would only land her in prison and ruin her life, but at least she would have a life to live. A couple minutes pass. Alex sees the front door open back up with Officer Chester returning to the squad car. He opens the back door and looks at Alex with a puzzled face. "Ma'am, I'm really confused. Is this the right house?" he asks. "Yes, sir," Alex responds. "And that is your brother in there, Baylor?" he questions. "Yes, sir," she answers. "Miss Ingram, there's no threat in that house. Please follow me," he tells her while helping her out of the car. The two walk up to the door of a normal-looking family-style house. To Alex, though, this was the gate to hell for the next 6 months, or as long as she was still breathing. They walk into the house, and she sees the young man sitting in the chair facing a wall, a blank look on his face. Alex's heart starts racing, and she even turns to the door trying to run out before Officer Chester grabs her arm and stops her. She turns back towards him, only to see an old woman standing in front of her face. Alex let out a small yelp of fear. "You must be Alex. So nice to meet you. I'm Nurse Turner, but you can just call me Rose, though." The nice old lady responds, "I'm your brother's home nurse." "Nice to meet you," Alex says, still shaken by the situation. "Now I have to run back upstairs real quick and finish cleaning. I'll let you settle in. Your brother will be so excited to have you here," Rose explains. Officer Chester and Alex start walking closer to her brother. With each step, her legs get more and more shaky. They finally walk up to Baylor, and he does not move a muscle. "What's wrong with him?" asks Officer Chester in the nicest way possible. "He's blind and deaf," Alex responds. "Got it. And how long has he been like this?" he asks. "Since birth," she responds, with a panicked tone. The both of them stood there for a minute, trying to gather thoughts. Alex worried about her next 6 months and how she was going to make it out alive. Officer Chester wondered how in the world she could see any type of danger. "Ma'am, I don't mean to be rude, but why are you scared?" he asked in a confused manner. "He hates me because I can live a normal life. I was born normal. My parents used to have to explain to him I have no choice in the matter, but he always done things that could have gotten me killed," Alex explains. Officer Chester is having doubts that Alex is telling the truth. "Miss Ingram, I think you're going to be just fine living here." "Easy for you to say," she says under her breath. "I mean, we've had an entire conversation right next to him, and he doesn't even know that we're here," he says sarcastically as Rose walks down the stairs and enters the conversation. "He would love to know that you're here," Rose says with joy. "How would he know that we're here, ma'am?" asks Officer Chester. "He has heightened senses and can feel a person's energy and tell who it is if he's met you before," Rose shares. "All you have to do is put your hand on his shoulder." Rose then grabs Alex's hand and moves it to Baylor's shoulder. The moment that Alex touches his hand, it's like she's stuck it into an oven. It's boiling. There's pain in her hand that sends a sharp torment through her entire body. Baylor snaps and grabs his sister's hand forcefully. Alex let out a scream and began calling out in pain. "He's going to break my hand," she screams. Just then, Officer Chester touches his hand on Baylor's other shoulder. He lets go of Alex's arm. The two others looked at her with confusing grins. They believe she is playing into the whole Baylor's evil thing a little too much. Officer Chester prepares Alex and walks her through all the rules of house arrest. "You are not to leave the property. I have set up a perimeter. If you leave at any point, the alarm will sound and I will be over here in just 10 minutes to ensure that you are still here," Officer Chester explains. "You work from home. All the groceries will be purchased by Rose, so there's no reason for you to leave. This is meant to be a rehabilitation, to get your mind right. If anything were to happen to you again legally, you would not be as lucky. Take this punishment gracefully. The next 6 months will fly by." "Rose, you'll be here all the time, correct?" Alex asks the nurse. "No, honey. I'm just here from sunup till sundown. I do everything for Baylor during the day, but once I get him to bed for the evening, I go home and get a good night's rest in my bed before heading back in the morning," Rose explains. "Why wouldn't you stay around the clock? What if he needs something at night?" Alex says, with worry about her safety. "I've been doing this since your parents passed away, and he is fine at night. He has everything he would need, and he usually just sleeps peacefully," she answers. "Plus, now that you're here, maybe you can keep an eye on him during the night?" "I don't know how to take care of him, though," Alex says in panic. "It's very simple. You won't ever have to worry about him. He just sleeps anyway," says Rose. "I'm sure Miss Ingram won't have any issues in taking care of her blind and deaf brother at night, right?" Officer Chester says in an annoyed tone. "Yes, sir," Alex answers in a scared manner. "Great. Well, you're all set. I will leave you to it. Have a wonderful evening," Officer Chester tells both the ladies before exiting the house and driving away. Rose then puts Baylor to bed, and she also leaves the house, leaving Alex and Baylor home alone. Alex enters Baylor's bedroom cautiously and looks at her now asleep brother. Maybe they are right. He can't hear or see. Maybe she'll be fine. How much damage could he do? She exits the room and heads to her room upstairs and prepares for bed. It took Alex some time to get to sleep. She was uncomfortable and also worried about the thought of sleeping in the same house as her brother. After some time, she finally had fallen asleep to the exhaustion of the entire day. In the middle of the night, Alex was awoken by what sounded like footsteps going up the stairs towards her room. She was paralyzed in fear of what might be coming her way. She was quiet and moved her eyes towards the door to her room. The footsteps stopped for a second, and she thought she was in the clear. It was only then that the door began to slowly open. Alex, in terror, jumped onto the floor and rolled under the bed. She sees the door open and the footsteps of Baylor walking to the edge of the bed. She could hear the sound of his arm dragging around the top of the bed. He was clearly looking to see where she was. After moving his hand around the entire bed, Baylor stands there for a second. Alex lays motionless on the floor, trying to avoid doing anything that would give her location away. After some time, Baylor finally left the edge of the bed and started leaving the room. As he left, Alex noticed Baylor had a knife in his hand. This image only ensured Alex was in danger of her brother. After one night of her 6 months residency of living with her brother, she had to tell someone. But who would believe her? Confinement, Chapter 2. The next morning, Alex heard a car door shut in the driveway. She frantically ran downstairs, meeting Nurse Rose at the entryway of the house. She was wrestling with her emotions of telling her what happened while she was gone, but at the same time worried that she would sound crazy to her. Alex was left with no choice, though, because she was in danger in the house. Maybe Rose would believe her after all. "Good morning, sweetie," Rose said to Alex with a smile. "Good morning, ma'am," Alex said in her stressed-out tone. "Rose, I need to talk to you about what happened last night." "Oh dear, Baylor didn't give you any trouble, did he?" she asked. "Hopefully he wasn't too much of a handful. I swear he never leaves his bed." "Well, he did. she responds to the nurse. Not only did he leave his bed, he entered my room with a knife. I know I sound insane, but I swear, I know what I saw. I tried to tell the court he has a vendetta against me, and I'm in trouble. He may try to kill me during my sentence. Nurse Rose stares blankly at Alex, not understanding what she is talking about. Honey, I don't think you have anything to worry about. You must have had a bad dream. You've been through a lot lately. It's probably causing some lucid dreams. Just take a day to relax. I can bring you some breakfast and a hot cup of coffee. No, I know what I saw, Alex said in panic. Baylor's going to harm me. This was my first night here, and I have 5 months and 29 days until I can get out of here, and he's going to try this again. Alex, I think you're severely overreacting, Rose states, trying to calm her down. If it would make you feel better, we can move you to the other bedroom. There's a lock on the door, just so you can feel a little safer. She agrees and thinks that will help. A change in room, along with a locked door at night, should be able to keep her out of danger of her brother. She was unable to shake the anxiety of living under the same roof as him, though. At nighttime, when Rose would leave, the horror of the unknown set in. What would happen that night? Maybe nothing. What if Alex did just dream it all? However, she was in for the truth that evening. Starting to doze off into sleep, she was awoken by a noise outside the bedroom. It sounded like something moving against a wall, a metallic object. Soon after, the door opens down the hall. It was the door to the room that she was in the night before. She leaped out of bed and put her ear to the door to hear the sounds coming from the other room. After a minute, she heard what sounded like fabric being torn. Baylor was once again trying to find his sister and end her life. Luckily, this time, she was in a safer room. A few minutes passed, and the door to the other room slammed shut. She would hear loud footsteps walking down the hall. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped in front of her door. She takes a few steps back and falls on the bed, her heart pounding through her entire body. The doorknob began to shake vigorously. Alex felt tears running from her eyes as she was so scared that the door would open and that she would have to fight for her life. After what felt like an eternity, the door stood still. One final bang was made on the door, and the footsteps from Baylor became more silent with every passing step. Alex was safe. After the events that had just taken place, Alex had a little peace in her life. She knew she was safe as long as she was in the room with the door locked. Exhausted from the past few days, she was able to fall fast asleep. While sleeping, she would dream that she was in her 5-star hotel rooms, which she lived out for weeks upon time, eating at the most gourmet restaurants and visiting some of the most amazing sights. She worked in different hotel rooms in different cities instead of having an apartment. This was living for her, and with the amount of money she would make at her corporate level job, she could do all this without a financial care in the world. These dreams kept Alex at ease and helped her escape from the world she was currently living in. This proved to be an enemy to her when she awoken in the middle of the night with the worst urge of needing to use the bathroom. Without thinking, she would get out of bed and unlock her door, making her way to the bathroom down the hall. She walked in the bathroom and relieves herself. She flushes the toilet and looks herself in the mirror, checking her teeth like she always does, making sure that everything looks right and that there are no cavities. After her bathroom checkup, she opens the door and steps out of the room. She would not make it one step before she was pinned up against the wall. Baylor had trapped her with a knife in hand. Alex's fight-or-flight mentality came in, and she reached for the knife. Her brother forcefully tried to pull it towards her neck, but she was doing everything in her power to stop it. She feared this would be the end, as the knife inched closer to her with every passing second. As Baylor was seconds away from murdering his sister, a spot of light flashed in the house coming from the window. It was the sunrise. As soon as the sunshine hit Baylor's shoulder, he stopped. Alex was confused with what happened, but she had known she was safe. Baylor walked down the hallway and back into his bedroom, like nothing happened. Alex followed him and saw him lying down in his bed. Just as his head rested on the pillow, the front door opened and Nurse Rose walked in. "You're up early," the nurse says. Alex just turned around and went to her bedroom without even saying a word. What good would it do? No one was going to listen. Alex would get a little rest prior to starting her workday. Later on in the morning, she found herself back in the bathroom, having visions of what had just transpired. She stared at herself in the mirror again, not a checkup, but a reality check. It was when she flushed the toilet when she noticed a slight vibration in the floors of the plumbing running through the house. This is how Baylor figured out where she was. Alex knew now she would have to find a way around not using the bathroom while Nurse Rose was gone. Her life was now a strategy game. Alex would set up alarms on her phone to remind her not to drink any liquid and also have an early dinner. This would ensure she would not have to use the bathroom during the night. As long as she stays in the room once the night falls, she will be safe. This would be the path to victory for Alex. For the entire week, she would lock herself in her room until dawn. Every night, she would hear footsteps walking up to the door. Then Baylor would start rattling the doorknob before giving up and walking back to his room. Alex was safe and could sleep with a little bit more ease every single night. This calming sensation would not stick around very long, though. After a couple weeks of perfecting her plan, it was ruined all within one evening. Alex, waking from her deep sleep, felt a slight push on the bed. Slowly opening her eyes revealed Baylor standing over her, knife in hand, and in a split second, her fight-or-flight instincts kicked in again. Alex would reach for his wrist to stop the forward trajectory of the knife going straight down towards her. She was wondering how this happened. She had locked the door. Did he kick the door down? No, she would have heard that. Did he pick the lock? How would that be possible? He can't hear or see. How would it have been possibly figure out how to pick a lock? She may not ever find out, though, because Baylor's strength was pushing the knife ever so closely to her chest. She fought with all her might, but her senses were still waking up. The knife inched closer to her chest. It was the dead of night, and Alex knew Nurse Rose would not be there for a few more hours. Finally, the tip of Baylor's knife penetrated her skin. Alex let out a scream, and she swung her legs around, kicking her brother to the ground. A small amount of blood dripped from the middle of her chest. It was a minor injury, but enough to make Alex realize this was real. This wasn't a game to Baylor. He had murder on his mind and would not stop. Alex jumped out of bed over her brother. However, he grabbed her ankle as she leapt over him, causing her to trip. She was able to fight free as he looked for the knife. She began running down the stairs, but Baylor was not that far behind. Alex knew it would be best to walk as quietly as possible, as he would not be able to tell where she was. She made it down to the kitchen, where she stood behind the island. Baylor followed her into the kitchen, but stood still, like he was trying to heighten the senses of the area. He stepped closer to her, causing Alex to back off a couple steps. She bumped into the counter, causing a plate hanging on the edge to fall and land on the floor. This ignited Baylor to attack. There was no running for Alex, as her brother was following her footsteps. He was able to grab another knife from the kitchen counter and threw it at Alex's direction, barely missing her head and landing on the wall in front of her. She got him to run through the broken plate, causing him to let out a scream and stop him from running for a second. Alex quickly thought of some sort of plan to escape the situation. There was only one way she could think of to get help. She quickly ran out the door towards the street. Baylor followed her, now with a limp in his run, but still determined to end his sister. She made it to the street, where she would step one foot on the road before an alarm went off on her ankle monitor. It rang for 5 seconds before she had to avoid another attack from Baylor. Alex now ran back in the house. Baylor was lost until she slammed the front door and locked it. Alex fell to the ground behind the door. She would hear her brother's footsteps stomping up the door before he tried to open it. After a few seconds, it was silent. Alex would breathe out a sigh of relief, being able to escape her brother. However, this was only the beginning. She still had to fight over 5 months. She still had to live in the same house as him. If he was able to get into her room tonight, what would stop him in the future? As all this went through her head, she would hear a creak on the floor. She turned her head slowly and saw Baylor standing behind her, charging his knife once again towards his sister. He must have gotten in from either the back door or maybe a window was open. She rolled out of the way to dodge his pounce. She started crawling as she couldn't get her footing. Baylor, right on her heels, was not giving up. As he crept closer, there was a loud bang at the door. "Alex, it's Officer Chester. Open up," he yelled. It became still as Alex ran towards the door and swung it open as fast as she could. "He's trying to kill me," she screamed at the cop. Who? He responded. Is there an intruder? No, it's Baylor. Alex, how many times do we have to go over this? He says with disappointment and anger. Your brother cannot see, he cannot hear. I still believe he doesn't even know that you're here. Please, check him. He has a knife, she begged. The policeman shook his head and began walking up to the brother and checked his hands and his pockets. Ma'am, there is no knife, no weapon, nothing, he explained. This cut on my chest, it was from him, she cried out. Officer Chester looked at the cut and could see there was a fresh wound. Alex, I'm not sure how you got that, but I'm almost 1,000,000% sure he did not do this to you, he told her. Now your alarm went off, meaning you left the premises. This is not allowed per the rules of your house arrest. Alex looked nervous, but then excited. You're right, officer. I need to go to jail now. I left the house, and now I've accepted my fate, she said with the hope of leaving the house, even if it means jail. Seriously, Alex, I'm not taking you to jail. Your alarm went off, but when I checked on you, you're still in the house. As far as I know, it was just a bug and went off by accident, he tells her. Nope, I left. Cuff me up, sir, she says with excitement. I'm not going to arrest you. You don't want that. Because if I take you to jail, you would have to go back to court. Not only would you have your original felony, but now you'd have fleeing. You probably not getting out of prison ever. Alex thought about this and thought better of it. She didn't want to die, but not getting out of prison would have been just the same. She would just have to come up with ways to avoid her brother for the next 5 months. The officer left the scene, and Baylor left for his room. Alex would close the front door and start walking back when the headlights from Officer Chester's car flashed through the window and revealed a reflection coming from the houseplant. She walked up to it to find the knife, with her dried blood on the tip of the knife. She brought it with her to the bedroom. Alex would spend the rest of the night with the knife in her hands, with her back against the door, scared of another attack from Baylor. The rest of the night would be still. As the sun rose, Alex was safe for another night. But how many more would she survive? Confinement, Chapter 3. The next couple of nights were sleepless for Alex. She began to barricade herself in her room, putting all the furniture she could pile in front of the door. Every night, for hours now, Baylor would attempt to break into the room, but with no success. However, this required her to stay up the entire time, pushing her body against the barricade as a last line of defense to ensure her brother couldn't enter. The anxiety was becoming too much for Alex to bear. She had to think of a better way to survive the night. She craved the idea of peace, even just for one night. Sitting on the hardwood floor of the bedroom, from sundown to sunup, along with the evil living in the same house as her, was making her go psychotic. One morning, when Nurse Rose arrived at the house, Alex would meet her at the front door, needing her help to follow her plans. Good morning, Alex, says Rose. Would you mind running to the hardware store for me as soon as possible? Asks Alex urgently. Sure, sweetie, she responds. What do you need from there? I made a list. I wanted to make a loft in my bedroom, she says with certainty. A loft? Nurse Rose asked with concern. Yes, I used to have one back in college. It helped me sleep and gave me comfort. I would like to recreate it since I'm having so much trouble sleeping. Okay, I guess. Are you sure you know how to do that? Yes, I can do it. I just need the supplies. Here's the list and money to pay for it. What about the room? Won't it be a mess? I'm not sure many people would want a loft in their bedroom. I'll fix everything when I get off house arrest. It's just what I need for now. Okay, whatever you say. I'll run to the store in a little while after I make Baylor's breakfast. Nurse Rose finally agreed. A few hours later, Rose gets back from the hardware store with all the supplies that Alex requested. She began building this loft. While building, she was making a lot of noise along with beating and banging on the wall. She began to worry that what if Baylor had figured out what she was doing? He knew the water was running through the pipes that one night. That's how she got caught. She knew that if she wanted to save her life and her sanity, this may be the only way. Not only that, but it would completely change the layout of the room that Baylor was used to. After the whole day of working, Nurse Rose walks into Alex's room to see the finished product of her new loft. Oh, wow. This is something, Nurse Rose says in an attempt to not sound mean. It was far from perfect, and an eyesore. It was a plank of wood running across the wall. It was hanging about a foot from the ceiling. Alex was putting a world of fate into the screws that were hanging to the planks on the wall. The only other thing keeping it up was a steel chain hanging down, holding the loft up, on the end that was not connected to the wall. I put it up high so anyone can still walk under it, says Alex. You'll be sleeping up there? Asked Rose. Yes, I got my mattress up there. I'll spend my nights up there, and I'll feel more comfortable. Whatever makes you happy, sweetie, says Nurse Rose while exiting the room and heading home for the night. After she left, Alex climbed her way slowly onto the loft for the first time. It seemed to be very unsturdy. Her arms began shaking while climbing up there. This was a tough task to begin with because of how high it was, and there was only room to lay down and absolutely nothing else. She rolled onto the loft and laid there for a few minutes while the loft stopped shaking. It was holding her weight, though. It was scary, but it was doing its job. Later that night, Alex was awoken by Baylor opening the door to her room. She had forgotten to lock the door. It was time to see if the loft was her safe place or her cause of death. Baylor walked in slowly and began walking to where the bed should be. Alex begins to worry that she may have not made it tall enough. If he hit his head on the loft, there was no way Alex would be able to get down in time and safely. Baylor encroached on where the loft was hanging. She was sweating, hoping he would walk right under it and not even notice it. His head inches away from the loft. He takes one final step and he slides right under. Another inch and a half down and the top of his head would have grazed the bottom of the loft. He bends down and starts feeling where the bed's supposed to be. He reaches around for a minute, clueless at why the bed was not there. He felt around the rest of the room, knowing the bed had to be there somewhere. But at last, it wasn't. At least anywhere on the ground, that is. Baylor exited the room, I guess thinking that his sister must have changed rooms and brought the bed with her. Alex was safe once again. This time, it may be the long-term solution. The loft ended up being the best move for Alex. She would continue to not lock the door, thinking that maybe that's what led Baylor to believe that she wasn't in the room. For the next 4 months, Baylor would enter the room every night looking for Alex. When he didn't feel the bed there, he would leave and check all the other rooms, but would fail to find her. With 1 month to go, Alex felt calm in the evening time. Her brother was clueless about her location, and she never felt safer. That was until one night. It must have been something she ate or drank. Her stomach started bubbling. She fought the sensation and the urge to use the bathroom, but in the end, she had no choice but to crawl out of the loft and head towards the bathroom. She made it in there, and when she stood up, she instinctively flushed the toilet, knowing if Baylor didn't know her location before, he did now. Alex began thinking of what to do. She listened closely as she could hear the faint footsteps walking close to the door. She had to be ready to attack the second the door opened, otherwise it may be her demise. Her plan was to bend down and lay low because when he attacks, it's always to the head and chest area. She may have an advantage being lower to the ground. She opens the door quickly, and she sees her brother standing in the doorway. He threw out his fist with a knife in his hand towards where her neck would have been, and missed. Alex then jumped towards her brother's chest, knocking him down to the ground. She kicked the knife out of his hand and ran towards the bedroom. As Baylor is looking for the knife on the ground, she made it back to the room. She closes the door, hops on the loft as quickly as she can. As she's scooting her way fully onto the mattress, Baylor walks in and begins running towards where she is. He almost makes contact with her foot that was hanging down, but Alex was able to move onto the loft before he reached it. Baylor searches the room once again, but finds nothing. He leaves, and Alex exhales her breath. It was hard to explain, but the comfort she had for the past few months and then escaping death once again, it gave her an adrenaline rush. She felt invincible. She had survived the past 5 months, and now with 1 month left, she didn't think anything could happen to her. She had learned her brother's patterns, rhythms, for everything. She knew his fighting style, and she figured out how to avoid all of his strikes. She would begin to use the bathroom if need be any given night. She even started making a game out of it. It was like playing a video game on adventure mode to her. She was so comfortable with her surroundings. She even started messing with Baylor when he came into the room and would drop water on his head. She would laugh hysterically at it. But when you poke the bear enough, it will eventually attack. With 3 days remaining in her house arrest sentence, Alex would get out of the loft again to use the bathroom, not caring about the thud when she got off the loft or about the flushing sound of the toilet or any other noise that would come from it. She would sit there and stare at the mirror and think of how she wanted to avoid her brother's attack this time. She decided to get on the vanity and open the door. When the door opened, Baylor leaped in trying to find her. She jumped down behind him and started running towards her room. But he must have felt the wind fall, and he was very close behind her. Alex did not have a lot of space, and she still had to get into her loft. She had to make one big jump and hope that it was enough to get out of the way of her chasing brother. Alex jumped in what felt like slow motion, and her body moved into the small space. She landed with 3/4 of her body on the loft, and was able to curl her legs up so that her brother would not feel where she went. She had evaded him finding the loft, but the bigger problem was the snapping sound of the chains holding the loft in the air. The loft fell violently towards the ground with Alex on it. When it landed, the only thing that she could hope was that Baylor had already run underneath and that he was trapped below. She turned her head slowly towards the door, and Baylor was standing there unharmed with the knife in the hand, and the chase was on. Alex sprung up as the knife rapidly was heading towards her. She pushed her brother down and ran out of the room. This could not be happening, days before she would be free, and back in her lavish lifestyle, free from ever seeing her brother again. She was panic-stricken, with the anxiety of being chased by the evil in her life. She ran through the house with Baylor chasing all over. She tried to make noises in other directions to throw her brother off, but nothing was working. I guess the entire time that she thought that she had figured him out, he was figuring out her even better. All the moves that helped her avoid her brother in recent weeks were failing. Alex knew there was only one way to possibly get away. She had to set off the alarm again and get Officer Chester there. She ran towards the door, but didn't realize Baylor had broken a vase. She stepped on all the broken glass, slicing her foot into a bloody mess. She fell to the ground in pain, screaming about her foot. Baylor then jumped on top of his sister and pinned her down. She couldn't move. Her arms were locked up by him, and she could only accept her fate. Just then, a possible prayer was answered as a light from the sun started creeping in the house. Nurse Rose was going to be there. The light hits Baylor on the shoulder. He turns his head and nods while raising the knife towards the sky. "You did this to me," says Baylor. He slits the throat of his sister. Alex would begin to struggle for air as the blood would run out of her throat and onto the floor. Baylor then feels the vibrations coming from the driveway. Nurse Rose was arriving. At this time, Baylor had gotten what he'd wanted in life and slit his own throat. Nurse Rose would arrive to find both siblings on the ground, dead. Confinement, Chapter 4. The coroners arrived on the scene to remove the bodies. Both of them had a stretcher with one of the corpses on each. "This is new for me. What do you think happened here?" says the first coroner. "Only God will know now," says the other one. "I mean, she had to kill him, right?" "Why do you think that?" "Well, Baylor, he was blind and deaf. He couldn't have done anything, right?" "Baylor? Wait, this is Baylor and Alex Ingram?" "That's what it says in our report." "No way. I know them. Everyone knows them. They're part of the Ingram family." "I don't know them from here, though. I remember them before they moved, and the town they lived in before," the second coroner says. "Wait, did you say Baylor's been blind and deaf from birth?" "That's what they've always told us," says the first coroner. "That's weird because I remember Baylor, but he was normal when I knew him." The story that had played out in the house in that small town was just the surface of what this family has been through. Let's take it back even more than 6 months ago. Mr. and Mrs. Ingram were famous in their previous town, just as they were in their adopted town. Mr. Ingram was a judge who had a lot of love for his community and always had a heart for people. Even people who would be sentenced to court, he would try and find ways to understand where they came from and why they did what they did. He would even give them sentences that seemed light for their crimes committed. Mrs. Ingram ran a pharmacy that had the cheapest cost in the United States. She went out of her way to ensure that the people in the town were able to get the best deals for their prescriptions, even paying for some of the customers who didn't have the funds to pay for their medicines. Then there was Baylor. He was a beloved kid, a normal, sight-seeing, sound-hearing kid. He played football and basketball, he loved cars, and always finished at the top of his class. All around, they were the dream family that everyone had wished for. Finally, there was the older sister, Alex, who was the all-American girl. She was 4 years older than Baylor. Everyone in school loved her. All the boys wanted to be with her, and all the girls wanted to be her. She finished on the top of the class every single year, and all the teachers had nothing but good notes on her. However, Alex had a bit of a dark side that no one knew about. What Alex did at school compared to her home life seemed to be the polar opposite of the girl who she was portraying. She was able to hide it from everyone, even her parents, until she and Baylor had to share a bedroom for 1 month, while Alex's bedroom was being renovated. One night, Baylor had gotten home from football. When he went to his room, he noticed the door was locked. He knocked a couple of times, finally banging on it, asking for Alex to open the door. "Go away, Baylor," yelled Alex. Baylor, being the younger brother, had learned a couple tricks from his younger days. One was how to open a locked door in their house. Within a couple of seconds, he opened the door and saw his sister in bed with 3 other guys from the high school football team. Traumatized, Baylor slammed the door, ran downstairs, and told their parents what was going on upstairs. Mr. and Mrs. Ingram went upstairs to confront their daughter, catching one of the boys struggling to get out the window before they got to the room. Alex envied her brother, but in the reality, he was just looking out for his sister. She was too young to be doing that type of stuff with much older men. This was just the start of what Baylor would uncover from his sister's reality. A few nights later, while both children were supposed to be sleeping, Baylor was awoken by the sound of movement coming from Alex's bed, only to discover that she was doing hardcore drugs. "Alex, what are you doing?" Baylor asked with worry. "Don't worry about it, brat. It helps me sleep," she explained. "That stuff can kill you." "Hasn't done it yet, and I swear if you ever tell Mom and Dad, you will forever regret that decision." Baylor rolled back over and went to sleep, but the next day, he couldn't contain his emotions. He was severely worried about his sister's health and well-being. He finally told his parents, who confronted her later that evening. Even after she was grounded, she still lived the same way, still abusing drugs, sneaking out to meet with older men. Baylor would tell his parents every time, but nothing would be done, just a stern talking to. Finally, Alex had heard enough of her younger brother squealing everything that she did to their parents. One day after school, she would go to her mother's pharmacy. She was there to help out for the day, to get an allowance to get some spending money for the weekend. But in reality, she was there to look for 3 types of prescriptions that she had read about online. Throughout the day, she would find them and sneak them into her pocket. When she got home, she and her brother prepared for bed. When Baylor had gotten up to use the bathroom one final time, she had taken the pills she had stolen, smashed them up, and put them in her brother's water on his nightstand. Baylor returned to bed and took a giant gulp of water before falling asleep. The next morning was awoken by a scream coming from Baylor's bed. The drugs had worked. Baylor went to the hospital and was told they were not sure how it happened, but he is gone, blind and deaf, permanently. Alex seemed so scared and worried on the outside, but she actually was relieved to know she would be able to have as many guys over as she wanted, and Baylor wouldn't be able to hear them. She could do whatever drugs her heart desired because he wouldn't see them. The really sad part was that a week later, Alex would just return to her bedroom. Baylor wouldn't have heard or seen anything either way. A few days after the incident, Mr. and Mrs. Ingram received a phone call about the toxicology report about what drugs were inside of Baylor. When Mrs. Ingram heard, she had gone to check her inventory at her pharmacy. Lo and behold, they were missing, and only one person was at fault. That night, Alex confessed to her parents everything. She explained that her brother was going to ruin their family's reputation and couldn't let him get away with it. Mr. and Mrs. Ingram were shocked to hear this, but instead of punishing their daughter for revoking all their son's senses, they put their house on the market the next day and moved across the state to start their new lives. Their new lives as the loved Judge Ingram, who is all about the community and helping others. The best pharmacist in the United States, Mrs. Ingram, who takes care of every one of her customers and helps those who are in need of cheaper prescriptions. Alex Ingram, the all-American girl who is on the top of her class and is loved by all of her classmates. And finally, Baylor Ingram, the unfortunate tale of a boy born with no sight or hearing, but is still loved and taken care of by their family. It took some time for Baylor's other senses to heighten, but as soon as he was able to get accustomed to his new life, he had one thing on his mind: revenge. Alex had moved out at this time to live with her new boyfriend, who was 23, and lived in his own apartment. Baylor was being taken care of during the day by Nurse Rose. His mom and dad would come home and barely see Baylor because they saw him as an abomination to their family. If he would have just kept his mouth shut and let Alex live her life, they wouldn't be in this mess. One evening, after Nurse Rose had left and his parents went to sleep, Baylor had gotten up and grabbed his knife. He went to the car. He was able to get under the car and find and snap the brake line. The next morning, the news played, which showed both Alex and Baylor's parents had died in a car crash hitting a tree that morning. 2 down, 1 to go, Baylor thought. Alex, after leaving home, would never return to see her brother. Even at our parents' funeral, she stayed in the back. She knew that he was behind the crash. Her parents were the safest drivers and wouldn't put themselves in danger of their lives coming to an end earlier than they were supposed to. Alex lived with her boyfriend until she graduated college and got a corporate level position in New York City. But with the pandemic striking, she never made it to getting an apartment in New York City. She stayed in hotels as her job told her they would be working remotely from now on. This inspired her to live all over the world. Why be confined to a single city? She would travel all over the world, living in all different types of hotels and resorts, experiencing cultures that peasants who work hard for their money would never get to see. It was on a trip to Brazil that she would meet this boy who stole her heart. She thought he was perfect. She asked him to go travel the world with her, and they had the perfect love story. He was the cherry on top of the dream life that she felt she was due. However, illness struck her new man, and he became deathly ill. This caused her to go back to her hometown. He was unable to get any type of prescriptions due to him not being from that country. No doctor would see him or anything. The hospitals would give him lower ranked prescriptions to help with the pain, but not well enough to get him any better. This caused Alex to return home for the first time in years. She used to go to her mom's pharmacy and take whatever she wanted or needed, but her mom had died years before. She instead made a phone call to the pharmacy that her mother used to own. She put in a prescription pretending to be a doctor. The pharmacy accepted the prescription, and it all seemed to work. An hour later, Alex went to the pharmacy, only to see 3 policemen waiting at the desk for her. Everything would have gone smoothly if it wasn't for the pharmacist calling the doctor back to ask how many pills they needed. Alex was arrested and taken to jail. While in jail for that night, she was told that her boyfriend had died in their hotel room. If only she would have known in less than a year's time they would be reunited in the afterlife. Baylor had one purpose in life. He lost his sight and hearing. He was patient and waited for his time. The once perfect family was buried next to each other in their family cemetery. Although they lay 6 feet deep, Baylor came out on top. He achieved his life mission. and Baylor got his revenge. Hope that you guys did enjoy. That is going to do it for today. That's going to do it for Confinement. That story will now be added to the shelf of stories that we have told on the channel. But have no fear, we will be back, but not next week, because next week is one of those weird Fridays that it's the 5th Friday of a month, only happens a few times a year. So there will not be a new story next week, although I do ask that you do show up, because there is a very, very special video I have to share with all of you. So definitely come back next Friday, same exact time, 9 Eastern, 8 Central, 6 Pacific time, for that big video. Like I said, I'm very excited to be sharing it with you guys. So that'll be next Friday, and then the Friday afterwards we will be starting a brand new story, same exact time as always on Friday. We make videos 3 times every single week. Every Monday we do an episode of Echoes of the Past, which is my paranormal haunted history series that I do. Every Wednesday we do an episode of Far From Fiction, which is my true crime series. And then, of course, every single Friday, the Friday Night Campfire stories will be brought to you here on the channel. So, like I said earlier in the video, we are trying to get to 50 subscribers by the end of January. So if you can help me out in any way by clicking that, it would mean a lot to me. Be sure to click the like button as well. That also helps. And then also, there will be a new video tomorrow. As always, the day after we finish a story, I put the full story up on the channel. That way, in case anybody in the future wants to watch the whole thing, or maybe you're going on a car ride or something and just need something to listen to for an hour or so, you have that available for you. But anyway, that is going to do it for today. Hope you guys did enjoy. Thank you for spending a little bit of your evening here with me.